without further ado, I'm turning it over to Greg Peterson. Thank you.
You're in for a treat. This guy's the real deal. Born in 1923 in a place called Westfield, New Jersey, and finds his way here, and he is an icon. So to have Phil Wight here on stage at Maple Grove is an extraordinary thrill for me, but also you'll enjoy learning about a man who actually, you're not reading about history, you're actually listening to history. That's what we're here to talk about. We're going to show briefly a 2.5-minute video on something called Operation Chowhound. What was that? World War II started in 1939. The Germans entered Poland. That was the beginning of a war which would last for 6 years, which enveloped most of the world, including the United States. We got involved starting in December 7th, 1941, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. You will read about that. And Phil Wight was one of those individuals who responded to the call of action in 1943. And we find our way to being part of a bomber group. He was a gunner, he was a radio operator. That's what makes his story so extraordinary. We're going to hear it in a few minutes. But to wrap everybody's head around this, I'm looking back there, and we're going to show a 2.5-minute video on something called Operation Chowhound, which occurred in the last days of 1945. Operation Chowhound was a humanitarian food drop carried out to relieve famine in German-occupied Holland, which had been occupied since really the first part of the war. And the Allies conducted that even though the Germans actually they were in Holland and we couldn't get in there. So you're going to see a little bit about what happened, and that will lead to some stories which Phil Wight, your Phil Wight, was all about. So without further ado, we'll show that movie.
I would like to say that I'm very proud to be here, and I'm very proud to have you all here. Thank you, thank you.
special readers who will give a little flavor to what just happened at Amsterdam in 1945, and then we'll conduct an interview with a person who was part of that. Thank you, boys.
This is from an embroidered tablecloth. I was born in Amsterdam and was 12 at the outbreak of war in 1940. It seemed the war went on and on, with curfews and blackouts and having to tape up the windows. We never thought it would be 5 long years. Of course, the last winter was the worst. No more wood to keep us warm, as my dad had chopped up all the cupboard doors and other woodwork in the house. Nothing to eat but the potato peels that the Germans threw out after eating our nice Dutch potatoes, and of course, there were the tulip bulbs. Ugh. My mom and dad had already bartered their gold rings, watches, and jewelry for food and potatoes. Later on, we traded nice bedding and linens. The farmers would take no money. Mom had one nice large tablecloth that she had embroidered with lovely yellow roses and with lace all around. One day in the dark after curfew, my sister, Ans, and I took a big chance. We took the tablecloth, with Mom's permission, and left the house on Ans's bike, which had no rubber tires but rope around the wheels. We rode to the nearest farm and exchanged the tablecloth for a small bag of potatoes. Enough for one meal, but we were happy. Homeward again, when all of a sudden we disappeared, bike and all, into a deep hole the Germans had dug. The bike was all right. We were a bit bruised, but I was still hanging on to the bag of potatoes. We were still able to have a good laugh, even with tears in our eyes. We were lucky we didn't meet any soldiers. Some things you just never forget.
This story is called Daily Life in Amsterdam. I remember waiting in the lineup at a bakery to receive our weekly bread ration. Alongside, due to lack of power at the pumping stations, stinking sewage was overflowing the manholes in the road. Fortunately, there had been mass vaccinations against typhoid fever. Water rats, which normally stayed in the canals, now climbed down the vertical brick walls of apartment blocks in search for food. There was no garbage around because whatever would burn was used for fuel. With no public transport and no usable bicycle, we walked to work. One sometimes saw a dog's head and skin in the gutter, people having eaten the dog, either their own or someone else's. Cats were long gone. Some people trapped birds on their apartment balcony for food. With no bicycle tires available, wooden sectional hoops with no coil springs inside were used instead. They did not last. With no leather or rubber available, resoling shoes was a problem. Linoleum floor covering worked fine as long as it did not get too wet. Tire sidewall worked best. Those few who had a telephone could connect a very small bulb in the wires and have some light to read by until the phone stopped working. Paperback pages had to do for toilet paper. Possessing a telephone directory was the ultimate luxury. Interesting color combinations and knitted sweaters resulted from using woolen yarns salvaged from old sweaters. Looks were not important. The most common small talk, joking about food and how it used to taste.
Thank you very much. Just for the students, do you remember where you were December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor?
I was in
Phil, you want to hold up your mic?
Rutgers Prep.
Just hold up your mic, Phil.
I was in Rutgers Prep because I didn't do too well in my senior year, so I went and took an extra course before I went to college.
Do you remember much that there was any excitement at school about this bombing?
All of the students there with me, classmates, we sat there and we listened and we said, wow, we're going to get into this, and we were a little excited, yes.
So you joined the Army Air Force in 1943.
I wanted to enlist. My mother said, we have one son in there, I have a son in there, you're not going to go. So I was They sent me in in 42, I was inducted.
So you're inducted into the Army Air Force at the time?
385th.
Well, like I
At
said,
Great Ashfield is where I ended up after I went in the gunnery school.
so you're a gunner? What else did you do there?
I was the radio operator and a gunner, so I got the rank of sergeant.
I salute you. I salute you. And as and you were assigned fairly early on to London, and while in London, that was the time of the V1 and V2 bombs. Can you explain what that was all about?
Well, when we were there in England, the Limeys, we call them Limeys because they didn't really thought we were not so great to be there. They said we were overprayed, oversexed, and over there.
I won't ask you to explain.
Okay, I would be glad to.
I'm fearful of that.
All right.
And so with the V1 and V2 bombs that were coming over, that was pretty scary time.
Yes, whenever I went into a shelter, I was looking for a nice girl to go with me, but I didn't find her.
Yeah. And we're not naming names, are we? So, as you're being a bomber, being flights, tell the students a little bit about what it was that you were doing normally.
Well, the 385th was a B-17s, and that's all I flew in, actually. I did take cadet training, and I flew Piper aircraft, but they decided I was not a great pilot because I didn't land well.
And then you got into radio control, and
They sent me to Sioux Falls, and I took 6 months of radio operation, and then from there gunnery school, and we did a little bit of flying in gunnery school, and really they would send a plane up, and the plane would drag something behind them, and we would practice shooting at that.
you had various flight missions when you were over in Europe. And can you explain, because most students will not have had the experience of what it was like to actually be in a mission where there's some fighting going on? What did you how'd you feel?
Well, I can tell you the one mission I went on to, which scared me, because we were supposed to take out Royan, and we were supposed to bomb it in France, and we put these jelly bombs in the plane, and they were horribly volatile. And as we rode great altitude, and all this jelly started to come out the plane, off the bomb, and I said to myself, man, if we get any incoming fire like we did last week from any aircraft or fighter pilots, this thing will go up like kindling. So I was hard put to not put a new color in my pants.
Oh, yeah. And when you got done with those, this is beautiful. I love this. Really.
Hey, thank goodness he's got a sense of humor.
I don't know if I get taken off stride, but thank you. So, we just watched a movie called Operation Chowhound, and your group was asked to participate. Now, a little background, we know at the time of Operation Chowhound in the Netherlands, and Amsterdam specifically, the Germans were occupied. The Germans occupied the Netherlands, and they actually were surrounded by the Americans, and there was famine galore. going on. And so for humanitarian reasons, the Germans kind of created a truce to permit you and your group to help out the Dutch. Describe a little bit about what the experience was like.
Okay. Really, I was lying on my bunk and I got received a loudspeaker of all flying personnel who want to volunteer to fly a food mission to Holland up here at the flight line. So we took off, and I was standing an hour and a half later, 2 hours in the open bomb bay of a B-17 at 400 feet. A B-17 is not supposed to fly at that altitude, but if we dropped the food from too high up, it would be destroyed. And we were at treetop height, and we had some trouble getting over different buildings because they had staples. Be that as it may, we're supposed to fly into specific zones. And the truce with the Nazis was, if we get out of the zones, we may be fired upon. There was no pre-flight to this operation. We just loaded the plane, got on and flew, and we didn't have any idea as to what the circumstances were. If you didn't stay in the fly zone, then you may be shot at. And we were the only ones that weren't told where the zone was, and the 385th got shot at by the damn Germans.
So, but you had the opportunity to drop food, and could you explain how it actually worked? The bay was open, and then what happened?
Okay. Some of the planes had not automatic, but a rope hookup that could drop all of the food at once. But our plane didn't have it. We had to throw it out by hand. And the darn plane was up and down, around and everything. And as you got near the bomb bay, you didn't have anything to hold on. And we just threw it out and as the best we could. In one circumstances, the poor guy fell out of the plane, and his two comrades grabbed a hold of his legs and tried to pull him up, and they eventually did. But the 385th that I was in, because we weren't flying in the zone and were actually told where our zone was, we were attacked by anti-aircraft, and that was scary.
So literally, you are standing with an open bay, kicking out food to where you thought it was supposed to drop, and you have no protection. I mean, you're just standing there open. And
there was nothing to hold on. The bomb bay was completely open. So whatever you did in the plane was up and down, around, and everywhere you looked were other planes, and there was a lot of disturbance in the air, and the plane was hopping all over. And a lot of the time, we had to throw the food out, and then we get down on our hands and knees because it was a lot of burlap bags that got hooked up on the metal of the side of the bomb bay, and we had to crawl over near the bomb bay and cook it out.
did you ever wonder why you volunteered for that job when you're just so exposed?
I wouldn't do it now.
Just a great follow-up story. Obviously, that was a successful mission, Operation Chowhound. There's a book which Mr. Wight has, and it's on the subject of the Operation Chowhound, and it's a great detail. But many years later, you were in Myrtle Beach, and very relaxing. And tell that story.
I was walking the beach. It was about 1990, I think, somewhere's in there. Okay, I was walking the beach, and all of a sudden I came upon another guy, and he greeted me in guttural English, and I didn't understand him. And I said, "Hey, you're not from around here, are you?" He says, "No, I'm from Amsterdam, Holland." I said, "Oh, I know Amsterdam." And he says to me, "How do you know Amsterdam?" And I told him, and he grabbed a hold of me and hugged me. I thought he was going to make love to me. In any event, he told me that he was 19 years old. He was on the top of a building watching all of the planes come in. And he said to me, "I was amazed that you guys didn't crash into each other. There were so many planes in the sky."
What are the chances of you being in Myrtle Beach in 1990, actually meeting somebody that you and your group actually helped survive?
When I left this guy and we parted the company, I was walking down the beach and something came on to me, and I can't explain it now. But the Lord put his hand on my shoulder, somebody did, and said, "Phil, you drop bombs on people. You've now been told that you've saved people. I'm going to forgive you for your sins." And I got up and walked away, but I never could explain it.
As you reflect back, you have a sea of students here. You have a sea of students from Maple Grove, and you are part of the greatest generation. Tom Brokaw identified you, and appropriately so, as part of the greatest generation. And World War II is a major part of our history. What kind of message, legacy would you like to speak to the students? What would you like to say to them?
You guys and gals, I was in 1942 about the age that you are now. I never graduated from high school. They sent me my diploma in the mail. You guys are at the threshold of maturity. There's one great thing you can do for yourself. Use your common sense that the Lord has given you. Think. Put your hand in his. Let him guide you. And you will make it.
Phil, you've often, as we kind of draw towards closure here, you often said that your mother was your hero. And could you elaborate a little bit, because they're all family members here, a little bit about your feelings towards your mother, and especially during that time period during the war?
I lost a brother who fought the Japs in 1944. My mother was a Norwegian. Her mother and father came over from Norway, and when they didn't want me to understand something, they would talk Norwegian. My mother was a tremendously deep and wonderful person. She just loved life, and she had a great sense of humor, and she was just a beautiful, lovely person. And I think maybe all of our sons and daughters reciprocated from this.
On behalf of everybody here at Maple Grove, Bemus Point, your entire family, who probably, I don't know if they learned anything new today, but you have provided a great deal of insight, Phil, into what it was like to be a member of the greatest generation and to be part of World War II. And we just thank you profusely for taking time to share all of those thoughts with this group. So on behalf of everybody, thank you, thank you, thank you. We salute you.
Thank you.
Something you might not know is that Mr. White celebrated his 96th birthday last week. So if we could all sing happy birthday to him together, that would be wonderful. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. And sixth graders, have a wonderful evening. You're dismissed.
I gotta say, you were hilarious. Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Good job. Love you, man. See ya. I go to Dwarf.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Halfway price.